The moment heaven moved without your awareness. Chosen one. Before your mind tries to analyze this, let your spirit breathe first. This message is not arriving because you searched for it. It is arriving because you reached a point where silence could no longer teach you without explanation. There comes a moment in the life of every truly chosen soul where heaven acts without notifying the earth. No announcement, no warning, no sign you could point to and say, "This is it." And yet, everything changes. You began feeling it subtly, a strange calm mixed with unease. Not fear, distance, not sadness and detachment, not confusion, displacement. You didn't fall apart. You didn't break down. You simply stopped fitting into what once felt normal. That was the first signal. You must understand this clearly. The divine never waits for human understanding to move. Long before outcomes appear, long before doors open, long before people notice. Decisions are made in realms your eyes cannot see. And in your case, chosen one, a decision was already finalized. Not because you were perfect, not because you were loud, not because you demanded answers, but because you endured. You stayed when leaving would have been reasonable. You obeyed when obedience felt unrewarded. You remained faithful when faith felt heavy, rather than inspiring. That kind of faith does something powerful. It triggers authorization. There was a precise moment, quiet, uncelebrated, unnoticed, when your name was weighed. Your consistency was examined. Your restraint was recorded. Your ability to carry silence without becoming bitter was measured. And you passed. Not emotionally, not dramatically, legally. A verdict was issued. This is why you didn't feel a rush of excitement. This is why no sudden joy flooded your chest. This is why no instant breakthrough appeared. Heaven does not always announce promotion. Sometimes it confirms it and moves on. If you had known what was being released too early, fear would have interfered. Pride might have risen. Doubt could have delayed alignment. So mercy kept you unaware. Instead of fireworks, you were given distance. Instead of applause, you were given stillness. Instead of clarity, you were given weight. That weight you felt. That was responsibility settling into your spirit. You crossed a threshold without realizing it. A line exists in the spiritual realm where, once crossed, certain things can no longer be reversed. Your assignment passed that line. It could no longer be canceled. It could no longer be reassigned. It could no longer be aborted by delay, confusion, or opposition. That is why everything after that moment felt unfamiliar. Old desires lost flavor. Old goals lost urgency. Old conversations began draining you. You weren't becoming difficult. You were becoming misaligned with what you outgrew. This is what happens when authority increases before environment adjusts. Earth always lags behind heaven. What was approved spiritually had not yet arrived physically, and that gap confused you. You questioned yourself. You wondered if you were losing passion. You worried you were becoming disconnected, but you weren't losing anything. You were transitioning jurisdictions. Your tolerance dropped because your capacity rose. Your patience with chaos ended because your spirit entered a higher order. When heaven moves first, it often feels like nothing is happening, until suddenly everything that doesn't belong starts leaving. Doors closed without explanation. People exited without closure. Plans collapsed at the last moment, not because you failed, because interference was being removed. Graduation rarely feels celebratory. Promotion often feels isolating. And this is why you must stop interpreting discomfort as regression. You didn't go backward. You didn't miss timing. You didn't disappoint the divine. You were cleared for placement, and placement requires space. This is why silence became louder than noise. This is why solitude began healing more than socializing. This is why rest started calling you stronger than striving. Heaven was not testing you anymore. Heaven was trusting you. You were trusted with not knowing, trusted with waiting, trusted with not needing validation. And that level of trust is rare. This is only the beginning. What followed that authorization explains the resistance, the separation, and the warfare you faced afterward. And that is what Part 2 will reveal. Why resistance intensified after heaven approved you. Chosen one, there is something no one prepares you for. After heaven confirms you, life does not immediately get easier. In fact, for many chosen ones, this is the moment everything feels heavier, stranger, and more confrontational than ever before. You may have asked yourself, why did things get harder right when I became more peaceful? Why did opposition rise when I stopped fighting? Why did people turn cold when I became quiet? This is not confusion. This is cause and effect. When authority is released in the spiritual realm, resistance responds before manifestation does. The enemy does not attack potential. It attacks confirmation. Once your assignment was sealed, once your role could no longer be canceled or transferred, pressure was allowed to increase, not to destroy you, but to shape you. And here is a truth that will stabilize you. Resistance is not proof that you are off track. Resistance is proof that you are no longer insignificant. That is why the attacks became more targeted, not random chaos, but precise pressure. You noticed misunderstandings increase. You noticed people projecting onto you. You noticed subtle hostility where there used to be comfort. And most painfully, you noticed distance. People you once felt close to no longer understood you. Conversations felt forced. Connections felt shallow. Not because you became arrogant, not because you changed for the worse, but because you outgrew the version of yourself they were assigned to. Every chosen one eventually enters a season where familiarity becomes friction. Growth exposes incompatibility. This is where separation begins, not as punishment, but as alignment. And notice how it happened. No dramatic goodbyes, no clear explanations, no final conversations. People simply drifted. Doors quietly closed. Plans collapsed at the last moment. That was not failure. That was environmental correction. Heaven does not elevate a vessel and leave it surrounded by structures that can no longer support its weight. So interference was removed. Not everything that leaves is evil. Not everyone who exits is an enemy. Some things are simply expired. But here is where it became more intense. The resistance did not only come from people, it came from within. You began questioning yourself, doubting your instincts, wondering if something was wrong with you. This internal warfare is one of the most dangerous phases for a chosen one, because externally, nothing looks different, but internally, everything has shifted. Old motivations lost power. Old desires felt empty. Old identities no longer fit. And without understanding what is happening, many chosen ones misinterpret transition as loss. You were not losing yourself. You were shedding access points. Heaven was reducing what could reach you. Your tolerance dropped. Your patience for manipulation disappeared. Your appetite for shallow interaction faded. These were not personality changes. They were boundary upgrades. And boundaries always offend those who benefited from your previous openness. That is why silence became your safest posture. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending. You stopped proving. And that unsettled people. Because silence removes leverage. When you no longer react, others are forced to confront themselves. And many do not like what surfaces. So pressure increased. But understand this clearly. The resistance you faced was measured. You were never given more than your capacity could hold. Every delay trained your patience. Every closed door strengthened your discernment. Every disappointment developed your endurance. You were being trained for containment, because what is coming next cannot be carried by someone emotionally reactive, approval-dependent, or spiritually immature. If you had not been pressured, you would have been exposed too early. If you had not been misunderstood, you would have relied on validation. If you had not been isolated, you would not have learned self-governance. This season was not about punishment. It was about preparation under pressure. You were learning to stand without applause, to move without reassurance, to trust without visible confirmation. Most people cannot do this. That is why most people are never entrusted with what you are being prepared for. And now, look at yourself. You are calmer but sharper, quieter but more aware, less reactive but more discerning. You do not chase clarity anymore. You wait for alignment. That means the resistance did its job. It refined you, not reduced you. And now that this phase is ending, a new responsibility begins. Because once resistance subsides, stewardship starts. How you move now matters more than ever.